on this computer. Wonderful. Okay, Peggy, it's really, 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 really lovely to see you. I remember just before the lockdown, we were chatting by email about 2 years ago, and then you and Gloria were going to come up to New Brighton, and we were going to meet up for a coffee. So I guess this is a belated version of our get together chat from 2 years ago. So oh, you got your coffee. I've had mine, so I'm quite wired already. So I just thought what I would like to do, Peggy, is just I suppose make people aware of, just as a reminder of what this is, and what I don't know how this will go or where it will go this morning. It's going to be in the unfolding, which is very much Course of Miracles as well. But Peggy is a long-time friend and teacher of mine. She was one of my first Tai Chi teachers. And then over the years, she has such an incredible depth of knowledge, and this incredible book called A Course in Miracles. Now, one of what they call the Satguru in the yoga terms, with a great master that I follow in India, who was my main predominant teacher. He used to say that A Course in Miracles was Vedanta for the West. In other words, it was this incredible text that had appeared that just was one of the clearest teachings of how profoundly deep the spiritual journey is. And I study the course on and off, and I have it on audiobooks. I like to listen to it sometimes. I like to just pick up and read random passages for it, because it really celebrates the paradox of both non-duality, but in a way that also celebrates that there's this omnipresent consciousness, and it speaks about Christ, and it speaks about the Holy Spirit. So it uses a lot of language that we're comfortable in the West as spiritual seekers. So I guess that's probably enough of an introduction. I guess let's allow this conversation to unfold. But yeah, so is there anything you want to share to get us going about the Course in Miracles, or about yourself, Peggy?
Yeah, let's get to the heart of it. Let's keep it simple and get to the heart of it. For me, the Course in Miracles represents this beautiful path of going from living in fear to living in love, completely in love all the time. Can I do that yet? Of course I can't do it yet. Can any of us do it yet? I don't know whether Kenneth Wapnick, one of the great Course in Miracles teachers, he was almost there and then he died. I didn't know him very well. He seemed to live in love all of the time, but I can't vouch for that. I know I can't do it. But there's that hope there, isn't there? And this amazing course that we can do it eventually, however long it takes. And I quite like the Buddhist idea that we might have a few million lifetimes to get this right, because otherwise I think we're scuppered. So yeah, basically for me, it's a course in love. And that's why I think Marianne Williamson's book on the course, which was entitled Return to Love, was partly why it was such a bestseller, because we all want to return to love. And I spent all my life looking for love in all the wrong places, and I still do it. But the course, I think, is this beautiful, loving, kind, but radical and annoying and infuriating course, because like all the truth, it bashes us over the head, and we don't want to know the truth, because basically it's saying, the reason you don't return to love is because you're egoic, you're stuck in your own little crazy world, and you don't want to come out of it. So that's what's so annoying about the course. It's down to us. I mean, at one point the course says, look, Jesus, who supposedly channeled the course, said, look, I can't take your fear away from you. You created it, you get rid of it. And it's like, no, I want you to do it. So it is infuriating because it's so radical. I think all radical teachings have a difficult side to them, don't they? I mean, if you ask any advanced Buddhist practitioner, they've gone through hell and back to get where they are. And I think the course can be, it doesn't take you to hell and back, but I don't know, maybe it does. I've certainly had some hellish moments in my journey from fear to love, and still having them maybe, but maybe less. But that's what I've always wanted. I don't want to be enlightened. I don't want to be special. I don't want anything. I just want to live in love and share love. And it's not easy in this world. And, but the course is is like my Bible. And I think you're right, it does appeal to certain types in the West, particularly academic-y types like myself, because it gives you something to get your teeth into. It's almost a con, I think. It's like he said, let's create a really difficult book because Westerners like that. You know, they like to prove they can read something really difficult. And it's so simple. So funny enough, I put it down for a while, and I've just picked it up again this year and started doing the lessons yet again for about the 15th time. It's not like I think we choose to do the course. I think the course in some way chooses us. You know, I really do think that grace chooses us. That nobody deserves love more than anyone else. So why do some of us find a path towards love? I don't think it's anything to do with any virtues we have or intelligence or kindness or anything like that. It's just pure grace. And I suppose the only thing we have to do is say yes when grace hits us over the head a bit. And some people say no, and that's fine too. Because again, don't forget, we've got maybe a billion. Pema Chodron, that wonderful Buddhist teacher, was joking, because now she's getting older. She said, never mind, I've probably already had 1 billion lifetimes. And I'm like, 1 billion? I thought it was millions. But anyway, so we've got plenty of time to learn the course. Go on, Greg.
I was going to say also I feel sometimes there might be an interesting paradox in that because the course says actually there's no, from what I remember, it's like there is no time, you're already there. And it's like there's a story, a famous Vedantic story, and there's 2 yogis sat under 2 separate trees. And the idea is the divine, just to find out where they're up to, so to speak, takes on human form, and he goes to the first yogi. And he says, this yogi says, I've been meditating all of my life. How many more lifetimes do I have till I realize the self, till I realize divine intelligence? He said, you're nearly there, just a few more. And he flies into a rage, and he goes, I've been meditating for all these years, and how could you say it would take all this time, and I hate you, and this has been a big waste of time. And so then the idea is the divine, disguised as a beggar, walks off, and he finds this other yogi meditating under the tree, and this other yogis meditate for even longer. And so the meditator opens his eyes, realizes this is the divine, and says to the divine, oh, how wonderful to see you. How many lifetimes do I have left to realize the self? And the divine says, look at however many leaves there is on this huge tree. That's about the amount of lifetimes it's going to take for you to realize the self. And this yogi breaks into a big smile, and he said, and so the divine says to him, why are you smiling? And he says, oh, I'm just happy to be with you. I'm not bothered. It can take as many lifetimes as it likes. The fact that I'm with you now is all I want. And then the story is the divine smiles and says, in a way, you passed the test. You're already realized now. In other words, the belief in it taking many lifetimes might be necessary till we get to the point of absolute frustration that we're never going to get there. And in that moment, we collapse into where we already are and discover that we've always been there, you know. So there may be a paradox in that also.
That sounds like a Zen koan as well, that you have to try and crack it and crack it and crack it until you just give up, and then suddenly you've cracked it. Yeah.
Yes.
Of course, it isn't like that, because even now some of the text in the course is impenetrable, you know, and you bang your head against it, and maybe eventually just chuck the book out the window and say, who cares? And you know, but yes, I think all these great spiritual truths, they meet at the top, don't they? I love that idea. There's so many different paths up the mountain, but once you get to the top, there you all are together enjoying the view. So, and I find that the Course in Miracles has more in common with Vajrayana Buddhism, you know, the high level Tibetan Buddhist teachings, than it does with traditional Christianity, strangely enough. So yes, I love to be eclectic in my spiritual path. I mean, the course is my mainstay, but yeah, let's bring it all on, bring it all in, you know, especially any path that's a path towards love. And I think they all are. If you look at the Dalai Lama, he just beams out kindness. He says his religion is kindness, and I like that. Keep it simple. But the course, ironically, isn't simple, and yes, it is at the same time. I don't know.
So what is the technique? So I would love to see where you're up to in your understanding of, you know, where you are with. So in this return to love of you, as you've described it, is there like if so, for someone listening to this and thought, okay, I feel inspired, even just for today, let's take a lesson or an idea from the Course in Miracles to find out how to return to that love. You know, is there any advice or insight you have?
Let's think. First of all, it's always about going within, isn't it? Because it's so easy to get caught up in this crazy world. I say every day about 10 times the world is crazy, crazy, crazy. And it pulls us outwards and then we get agitated. I mean, you know, let's not go into vax or anti-vax or any of that. But, you know, at the moment, as usual, the world's gone mad and there's two sides and we're all fighting and all that good stuff. And the Course primarily is saying, just come within to your own mind and begin to see that your own mind is what is really at the heart of your problems, the heart of your fear, not what's going on in the world. And if you just change your own mind, the world will change. And of course, I think that's been distorted into, if you think positive thoughts, you'll get £1 million. And the Course isn't saying that at all. It's saying, look, it's a classic spiritual idea that this whole world is ultimately a bit like a dream, an endless dream that we're dreaming. And it's when we begin to see that, then of course we're the dreamer. And if we're the dreamer, then the Course says at one point, you can then forgive your brother. It uses male language, sorry about that. You can forgive your brother for what he has not done to you. And of course, when you first see that and you apply it to some awful incident in your life when someone's really hurt you, you're like, that's crazy. Of course he did it to me. I mean, classically as a woman, you know, me too. I mean, we've all had incidents with men as women, and you're like, he did it to me. But if the Course is right and this whole world is a dream and we are the dreamer, then I created that event in my mind. And this is all quite weird and wonderful, but I created that abusive event in my mind. Who therefore is ultimately responsible for my hurt and pain? The dream figure in my dream, or me, the dreamer. And when you just begin to play with that idea, it's quite scary in some ways. It's quite difficult to take on board that maybe, just maybe, I'm the dreamer of my own dream. And that when other people act in certain ways, I'm ultimately responsible for that. But the good point about that is that then you think, oh, well, maybe I should forgive them, not for what they really did, but for what I imagine they did in a dream world that feels endless to us, you know, all those stories about the yogis sitting there for many, many lifetimes. But what if it's all just a dream? And compared to eternity, of course, it's the blink of an eye, which the Course says, playing around with this idea of time. And when you get high enough, time disappears. So who cares that we've been suffering for millions of years, because it's all a dream and ultimately that time isn't real. You know, you've got to see it on different levels here. I mean, if it's my dream, I'm still not going to walk out in front of a truck and expect it to stop just by using my mind. That would be foolish. And Kenneth Wapnick, one of the great Course in Miracles teachers, used to say, don't be bliss ninnies and don't be silly, and, you know, be responsible in the dream. Do the right thing within the dream and try and help other people have a better dream, and so on and so forth. But see your responsibility for your life, for what's happening to you, or maybe at least start to see that you're responsible for how you react. If you can't go that far to see it all as a dream, maybe you can begin to look at how you react to what's happening to you, with love or fear.
So that's really feeds into a lot of what we call about healing trauma. This is, I suppose, another take on the language we use around that. So if we've carried trauma from what we perceive as a traumatic event, like I remember there was a beautiful Buddhist nun, just emanated light and grace in Thailand. I think she's called Mechi Sansani. And she works a lot with people who've encountered very terrible sexual violations through their life. And she teaches them that awful event has happened, but to relive it within the mind is a form of like just playing out the trauma again and again and again, and that can be very, very damaging. So she teaches them through kind of Buddhist meditation techniques and various other ways how to actually heal not the event itself necessarily, but the replaying of that event that keeps that trauma, that pain, that the terrible experience of that replaying within the being. So, and I guess that's an aspect of what you're describing in the Course in Miracles, seeing that there's different types of realities, they would say, maybe in Buddhism. One is, there's a reality that we're sat here having a conversation at the moment, and in Korean Zen that would be called enlightenment. It's because enlightenment in Korean Zen is only what is happening. If all that's happening in my reality now is I'm having this conversation with you, that's all of reality, is that's it, that's the completeness. However, if I'm having a conversation with you and I'm worried about what am I going to say next, and will I be misunderstood, and what happened today, and what's the time now, and that's not enlightenment, that's a scattered mind. So there's a lot of pointing to, as you're describing in these various traditions, including as you're describing it, Course in Miracles, that there seems to be different realities. One is the here and nowness, and one is the replaying of all kinds of memories and stories and concepts within the mind that stop us experiencing what Thich Nhat Hanh says there, that enlightenment is just partly the actualization we're having on a moment-to-moment basis. But he says there's two types of what we call awakening. He says that the moment-to-moment realization that this moment is complete. But also, he says, there's another type of enlightenment, which they will call self-actualization in psychology, that's who we become in the realization that this moment is complete. So like the journey and the destination both exist, but they're one and the same experience also. Anyway, sorry, I went off a bit of an excited tangent then.
No, it isn't, because the Course would say that it's the ego that stops us being fully in the moment, because the ego, the neurotic personality self, the neurotic separated self that the Course calls the ego, is never satisfied, is never happy in the current moment, is always looking for more, seeking and never finding, and pulling itself into the past and the future. So the egoic self cannot rest completely in the present moment, and we have to go above and beyond the ego and dissolve the ego in love's presence, in a way, to be fully present moment to moment, which is, of course, an enlightened state of being, which most of us can't achieve. I mean, I'm talking to you and I'm not nervous or anything, but I'm sure there's a little egoic blob inside my mind wanting to make the right impression, wanting people to like me. That's all ego, you know, because it's all based on me being separate from you, Graham, rather than the fact that we're all one child of God in a way, and there's no separation. And the Course is very clear on that, but again, it takes more than study, doesn't it, to get there? I think we need some experiences of that. We need that meditative openness, that heart-centered high energy, I think, to actually experience the oneness for ourselves, which I have been blessed to do a few times in my life, where you are just there completely in the moment, because there is only the moment, and you're one with flowers, plants, dogs, cats, you know, and it's a completely different world than the world we usually live in, because we usually live in the egoic world, and the Course says the egoic world is ruled very cruelly, and we can see that with all the rulers in the world. But it's not them, is it? It's us. Each and every one of us rules our own world cruelly, tries to grab what we think we need from other people in a very vicious way, except we do it with a smile because we're nice people, but we're not really.
Hiding.
You know, the ego is nasty, vicious and cruel, and the Course pulls no punches on that one. The separated self is nasty because it's fearful. You know, like when an animal's cornered, it can be so vicious because it's fearful. It's not that we're bad. Original sin's got nothing to do with being bad. Original sin is forgetting the beauty of the oneness and getting lost in the separation, which is instinctively fearful. And I've noticed, even with the COVID thing, fearful people do awful things. Fearful people are saying people have to be dragged in, held down and vaccinated against their will to protect them from getting COVID. It's a loopy idea because it's vicious, but that's what fearful people do. So I no longer I don't divide the world into good and evil. It's just those who are less fearful and therefore can have more of a loving presence, and those who are lost in fear you know, vicious people climbing to the top of the corporate ladder. They're just fearful, basically. And the Course says everyone's looking for love. You're either in love or looking for love. So that's a beautiful way of looking at people who appear to be vicious in some way or other in this world. They're looking for love in very weird, distorted ways. But, you know, there's a lovely game we can play on the spiritual path of, oh, look at us, we're the good guys. And the Course doesn't let us do that, really.
That's wonderful. It's they say that they have the image of Kali, goddess Kali, in India, and she's said to be one of the most on the esoteric level. They all represent energy or states of consciousness, if you like, emanations of the divine. And Kali, she holds the head of as the severed head of a priest. And the sword. And I remember one tantric, not the tantric in the internal sense, not the external tantra, but the internal tantra, a master in India, and he said that represents her decapitating the spiritual ego. And so the severed head of the priest represents who we when we get these moments of enlightenment, or we get some kind of, sometimes you may get a healing ability, psychic ability, maybe you'll get popularity or money or whatever it is, those kind of trappings of the world that you know, give me a golden cage over an iron cage any day, but you know, but yeah, that is the severed head of the spiritual ego. I think in relation to chakra, I've got a question around that shortly for you, but I sometimes wonder, we have this heart chakra in the center, maybe symbolically or maybe realistically, and that represents love. And for me, it's interesting, we have 3 chakras on the physical level above it, 3 chakras below it. And what I notice after speaking to teachers and looking at my own journey is that if we veer too high over it and we become disembodied and we become about spiritual experiences only, I think that's when we develop a spiritual ego. We're kind of in the light, but we're all happy and nice, but we somehow have maybe a superiority complex or a slight sense of disconnection with what we would call our brothers or our sisters. Then below the heart, we have the other type of ego, the physical ego, which is like me and mine, and I want to be the best on the physical level. And somehow when we can find that balance of being in the world but not of it, as Christ says, or the alignment of heaven and earth, as they call it in Tai Chi, when we have that balance, that's when we kind of find that calm center. I suppose my question is as well, we've mentioned, or you spoke about this ego very eloquently, and so let's go to the next step. So the Course has helped us see we have this ego, which, as you described, I see myself. I did a post about this morning how self-righteous and pumped up in itself it can be. So we discover we have this ego. Okay, what then? What then?
First of all, I think we can't fight it. You know, I think the Course says, you know, that some people think the Course says don't meditate, because at one point it says, you know, you can get there by meditating forever, but it's a bit tedious. I think it's talking about those 12-hour meditation sessions that some of the macho Buddhists do, and renouncing the world. You know, I'm becoming a monk and then tragically sexually abusing someone or something. You know, it's so obvious now, isn't it? I think the Catholic Church did us a huge favor actually by showing us that renouncing the world prematurely can be as dangerous as plunging in a way. So there's this fine line, isn't there? That's the trouble with this path, this very fine line of how to transcend the ego. For me, again, it comes down to that love, I think, and asking for help, of course, from higher beings, not being arrogant about it, but also forgiving ourselves for our arrogance, forgiving ourselves for our neediness, forgiving ourselves for everything. And I think in that warm blanket of loving kindness, compassion, and forgiveness, the ego naturally relaxes a little and eases off. I'm sure whilst we're in this world, we have to have some kind of ego actually to live in a physical body. I think it's just knowing that that's just a temporary self. that the ego isn't all bad. We need an ego to plan our holiday or to plan this, you know. It's not all bad, but we get too lost in it. So I love to talk about just stepping back from it. Yeah, I've got an ego, I've got a personality self, I can be arrogant, I can be a terrible snob. I'm a terrible snob about stupid people. I mean, I try not to be snobby about class anything. There's a program on TV, what's it called? House of Games, Richard Osman. It's very funny, and some really stupid people go on it, and I'm shouting at the TV, you're stupid. And then I notice my personality self doing that. And of course, A Course in Miracles doesn't necessarily think that's a wonderful thing to do, but I think we can see the funny side of it, really, and just think, oh, there Peggy Jane goes again, being arrogant about how intelligent she is. What a joke, you know. But being kind about it is just where my ego is, but not taking it seriously. You know, if we're all one, then I'm as stupid or as bright as everybody else. There is no distinction in that sense. But it's hard to see in daily life. It's really hard to maintain that calm abiding that the Buddhists talk about, but with a loving, compassionate heart. We lose it over and over and over and over again, you know, and that is the path, because it keeps us humble, I think. So in a way, when I notice I've lost it completely, I'm like, well, there's a positive side to that. I'm very suspicious of any spiritual teacher who says they've got it all sorted. I'm like, you know. I love some of the Buddhists, because they never claim that. They're taught to be humble. It's part of their path, and I've been copying that more recently, you know. Me too, in terms of I haven't got there yet either. You know, and these top Buddhists are like, oh yeah, I'm just like that. I'm like, no, you're not really. You've got further along the path, but they never claim it. And I love that. So we do need a little bit of discipline, I think, to at least to notice, to see. The seeing is the doing in the path, isn't it? We see the ego playing up. We don't beat ourselves up about it. We just go, oh, you know, the ego's playing up. And I think just that one step back, really, or one step up or out, I don't know which way we go on the path, but maybe one step up, and you just look down and go, oh, there she goes again, there he goes again. Because if we can't forgive ourselves, we're still going to not forgive others. And just seeing how similar we all are rather than different. I've got a dear friend recently, I met someone during this lockdown, and I visit her very, very regularly, and she's a bit lost in her own stuff, and she can get pretty arrogant and neurotic, and then I have to keep going, me too, you know. It's so easy to judge her and think that I'm the one doing the helping, but actually she's helping me to see so much about myself. I think that sort of attitude is helpful, really.
There's so many beautiful stories around that. I'm recalling one from the Desert Father tradition, when the Desert Fathers were the hardcore mystics of Christianity, that they started by literally just walking out into the desert without food or water and finding a cave to meditate in to see if God would keep them alive. And then
try that one at home, folks.
It was unbelievable. But the amazing thing was their order started because every time they started to really get trouble and get thirsty because they had no water, a camel would turn up with usually a Muslim trader, one of the Bedouin, and just see them in the cave, and he would give them food and water. And in that deep surrender, suddenly in the most hostile environments, life started to look after them. But anyway, the story, one of their stories from their tradition is that I was reading one of the people that they're saints, if you like. There's a story of a guy that goes to church, and I think he's just separated from his wife or some kind of problem. And the preacher in the church points him out and goes, "You're a terrible sinner, get out of my church." And so on the way out, he sees the guy who's seen as a saint just sat quietly at the back of the church. And he says, "I'll come outside with you." And so they go out together, and he goes, Baba, whatever his name was, he said, I'm a terrible sinner. He goes, "Oh, good, let's sit together because I am a terrible sinner too." And it's that humility, that embrace of humanness. And as I understand it, that's why a lot of they used to do it more in this country. St. Francis was a big proponent of this, but they don't necessarily so much the Christian mystics in this country do it anymore, but the Buddhists still do it, and they beg for food. And so then the idea is that however, you know, awakened, aware, aligned that they start to become, they still have to go and beg for their food to people every day, because it puts them in the most humble and vulnerable place to society, so it keeps them. Even Milarepa, I think Milarepa, or what, the guy who started Tibetan Buddhism, I think he was a beggar who lived on the streets like Christ. So I think, yeah, there's something beautiful, isn't it, about, there's something really humbling about not losing our ego. It's almost like if we lost our humanness and our pain, I think that's the danger of where the spiritual ego comes in, and then we start to feel that superiority. But as you beautifully describe, it's by seeing our brokenness and actually kind of making our peace. And I think that's my understanding, learning to laugh at it, learning to be light-hearted towards it. That's somehow how we found some kind of balance.
And the Course in Miracles itself isn't particularly funny, but I sometimes feel as though Christ or Jesus or whatever, the guy who channeled the Course is talking to me. It's just, I mean, it's my own mind, but and there is that sense of humor. Like at one point he said, and he does say in the Course, look, he said, would you please stop reacting to the world as if they're crucifying you? He said, they actually did crucify me and I managed to get over it. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. He said, and I always think that's very funny. So when I really get on my high horse and feel like I'm being crucified, I always hear this voice in my head going, stop it. They didn't actually crucify you. They crucified me. Get over it. And it makes me laugh for some reason. But of course, the Course is interesting because it doesn't talk too much about what to do in the world. You know, like the Buddhists have these rules, and there's nothing about whether you should be sexually celibate, or there's nothing about whether you should be poor in terms of material poverty. It really is very much focused on what's going on in our minds. And I think that's because the Course says, look, it's not real out there anyway. So whether you're rich in the dream or poor in the dream, or sexually active or sexually not active, really makes no difference in the long run. It's all to do with our heart, mind. And I think the mind in the Course must include the heart. Of course it does, like the Buddhist mind includes the heart, because it's so heart-centered in many ways, the Course. But it's interesting that it says so little about how to act in the world, whereas so many traditional religions are all about how to act in the world, you know. And I think Christ's original teachings probably got misinterpreted. He didn't mean that you couldn't have material wealth, but it's about not being so attached to it, not clinging to it. Like Anthony de Mello is wonderful on that it's the attachment, not the wealth itself, that's the problem. So when he said hate your mother and father, he was talking about being attached to certain people in the world and clinging to them, not hating anyone, obviously. So the Course is quite radical like that, because it really doesn't tell us how to live at all in any sense, telling us whether to be poor or rich, celibate or not celibate, monks, nuns, lay people, none of that comes into it. And that makes it quite timeless as well, I think, because it does stay out of the world a little bit, the Course, and just talks about what's going on in our minds. I think it'll be around for a long time, I suspect, because it has that timeless quality to the wisdom in it.
Beautiful. I think it reminds me of, it's like I think Deepak Chopra on one of it used to be like a computer advert of some kind. He used to describe it as we're human being, not human doing. And and so I noticed that actually that our state of being seems to dictate how we think and how we act. So in other words, if we can be in a state of love and calmness, then naturally our personality will reflect the gifts of that. I think Christ says something like, by the fruit you will know the tree, or something, or by the tree you know the fruit, something like this anyway. But the idea being that, as St. Francis said, you know, he used to say, always preach the gospel, and where necessary use words. And it's, but I think that's, you know, pointing to this realization. I remember reading in the Course, I don't know what your feelings are on this, but I remember reading somewhere that it says a few times that one of the biggest problems in the West is that we think that Christianity is a crucifixion story, and he said that that's the problem. It's a resurrection story. It's actually, we should be focused on the resurrection, that the crucifixion was a short period of suffering that was necessary for this resurrection, and that, I guess that's what the Course is talking about, our own resurrection quite a lot.
It's saying categorically that none of our suffering is ultimately real, because it doesn't last long. It might feel like it lasts a long time to us, but compared to eternity, it's a blink of an eye. And yes, Christ is very clear in the Course that don't focus on the crucifixion. He's like, again, paraphrasing, he said, look, I came back and I told you, look, I'm here, nothing happened, why are you getting so upset? And of course, from our worldly perspective, being crucified is the worst thing that can possibly happen. And he's saying, yeah, but I came back just to show you it was all this crazy dream. I don't blame anyone, it's all over, it didn't happen, you know. I mean, that's the core, isn't it? That's right at the beginning of the course. Nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. He's saying categorically the crucifixion wasn't real. You have to be careful in this world, though, because you don't want to go around saying the Holocaust wasn't real, because the suffering involved in that was horrendous. I mean, and the compassion, I think that's why I became an atheist when I was about 13, because I found out about the Holocaust and it shook me to the core and still does. But if it was real, then there's nowhere to go. We've got no hope, have we? If ultimately all this suffering is so real. But you have to, again, be very careful on what level you talk about that, because we're here in the dream and it's very real, and you can't go around causing suffering to people and say there are no consequences in the dream. But that profound idea that it is just a dream is so important, because otherwise, if suffering is real, then surely sin is real, because there's no other explanation other than that some form of punishment for original sin, I think, in my intellectual mind. But if the suffering isn't real, then the original sin isn't real either, and we're saved in a sense. We've cracked it.
What do you think? This isn't, sin is an interesting word, and I feel that, I think as you've already expressed, you know, that a lot of this language has almost been weaponized by the ego. It's like even like the word sin, as you know, in that story of the Desert Fathers, that the priest has weaponized the word sin as a form of, now I can judge the sinners, and that therefore God is a judgmental God, and I have the righteous backing of my father to be hateful because he is also hateful. But as I understand it, in the course, it talks about actually the God is a loving and a forgiving. How does the course describe the divine? You know, what does it kind of point to it in a certain way?
Well, God is certainly all loving, but and even more radically, God doesn't notice what's going on down here. He doesn't see it. He knows his child has gone AWOL. It doesn't use the term AWOL, but that's what it says. That my child has gone missing, like the prodigal son. I'm not quite sure where he is, and I sense a lack, so I'll send out some messengers to get him home. But he doesn't know where we are. He doesn't know what we're doing. So he didn't know Hitler was Hitler. He didn't care. I mean, Hitler's just a missing part of him, and Hitler will return home and be welcome to the feast. Now that, to us down here, strikes us almost blasphemous, doesn't it? So if I really want to shock people, I say, of course God loves Hitler. He loves him like his lost son. Oh, you can't say that. Well, I'm saying it, you know, I don't care. It is shocking, though. This is why you don't talk about A Course in Miracles to people unless they want to hear it, because it can shock the ego to the core. You know, of course we like sin because we want the others to be the sinners, and the Course says that categorically. Oh, look what they've done, they're the sinners, I'm the good person. So we love the fact that Hitler was the worst human being ever lived, or whoever else you want to choose. And then to hear that God loves him as his only son is shocking to us, but that's good, isn't it? It's good to get a little shock from time to time on the path. So yes, the divine love doesn't discriminate, and we want it to, and it doesn't.
It's hard to swallow that, isn't it? Because we so want to be on the right side, and we so want the others to be the devils, and we're the angels, and we're the light workers who've come to save the earth from the dark ones, and our religion is the only true religion, and the others are it's a very interesting. Rumi puts it beautifully, says out beyond, and I say this with hesitation because it's, as you're describing, I'm also aware of us being in the world, and it's good to stand up in a like a Gandhi or a Martin Luther King, where we perceive injustice. But I guess these kind of paths, they describe, if that is your dharma, that's your way, that's what you're here to do, you're doing it from a place of love. You're doing it from a place of that kind of divine spark or soul. So it's, yeah, so as I'm saying this, I'm also aware that of course we need to operate in the world, but we're trying to operate from, I guess, that place of love. So we can say no, and we can say yes without.
Well, yes, look at Nelson Mandela. My God, what an icon of moving from fear to love. I mean, my God,
Mm.
what a brave soul. And then to invite one of his guards to his inauguration when he became president of South Africa, Martin Luther King, it was about love. Gandhi, yeah, these icons, we have to realize they weren't fighting injustice. They were loving the world, and through their love of the world they wanted to end suffering in the world. And that's beautiful, but not fighting injustice. That's never going to work, because it comes from a place of anger, self-righteousness, and fear. So those are my icons. When you read Nelson Mandela's biography, and you see how much he turned, and through great suffering in his own being, and he managed to overcome that suffering and turn it into love, and not hate the oppressors, and know that they were just deluded. I like the word deluded. I think the Course uses it quite a lot. We're all deluded when we're separate anyway. Some of us just might seem a little bit more deluded than others, or maybe looking for love in more dangerous ways than others. Pedophiles are looking for love, you know, and they're, again, the people that we all love to hate. God doesn't hate pedophiles. God doesn't even know what's going on with them. He just, again, knows they're missing from heaven. He's just waiting for them to return to the feast. But most of us would not let the pedophiles come to the feast, would we?
It's interesting on this word. I think the word sin as well. It's like I've kind of meditated and thought about it, and I think this is where I'm up to with my understanding of the word sin. And I suppose this is what you would call not dissimilar to a Buddhist understanding. So I think sin is it's to act, think, or respond to life from our unconsciousness, and if you like, to respond from a place of closeness and separation, and all the thoughts and behavior patterns that arise from that place. And so I think that's what the Buddha described as the unconscious nature. And I think then to be free of sin is any moment in which we respond to life from an open-heartedness, from love. And when I say life, I think even responding to ourselves, as you described before, as we see that darkness within ourselves, that desire to judge and to hate. It's to even learn to respond to that in a way that breaks what they would call the wheel of samsara, which is the endless cycle of action, reaction, action, reaction, action, reaction, action. And it's in Buddhism, they say that's a never-ending cycle. And then so to respond to that from the divine self, if you like, is the breaking of that wheel. And I don't know if we just suddenly get there and that's it, or I think there's just times we manage to do that and times we don't. And every time we manage not to respond to ourselves, to life, from that place of hatred and unconsciousness, in a way we're planting a seed, as Eckhart Tolle describes it, was planting the seeds in consciousness. And every time we respond to it from hatred and fear, we're planting the seed of continue to be in because when you talk about the dream, that's not dissimilar to the Buddhist language of what they would call the wheel of samsara, or what they call in Hinduism, Vedanta, they call it the illusion Maya. You know, that this spinning web of Maya that we're caught in. So yeah, I wonder if the word sin simply means, I heard recently someone saying that the word sin, the actual root word that comes from, is an arrow missing the target. And so I think that's the word in sin is just simply a way of saying, oh, we've missed the target again. Or we could put it, we've missed the point. We've missed the point of life.
The original sin, if you like, was just that we had a crazy idea and forgot to laugh at it. And the crazy idea we had, according to the Course, which is all a bit mystical now rather than practical, was that we thought, I'm a bit fed up not being special. What if I go off and create my own little kingdom, then I can be the ruler of it, and then I will be special. So we thought, right, bye-bye, God, I'm going off and I'll have a go at being God. And off we went, created our own little egoic kingdom where we were the ruler of it. And oops, found it wasn't so easy as we thought. And so that the original sin, the Course says, just laugh at it. It's a mad idea that we're separate or special or lost or any of these things. It's all just delusional. You're crazy. The Course is very good. It uses words like delusional rather than bad. We're mad rather than bad. And that's very helpful, I think. Because even if you take someone like Hitler, he was deranged beyond beyond deranged, but we're all deranged. And then when you start to see that, that superiority starts to dissolve a little bit, and then you just have a different take on the world, and you get very upset when everyone's getting so angry about everything. But then that's possibly my ego rather than the bigger self. But I think it's Rupert Spira talks about, like, we're all a beautiful blank screen, you know, we are the oneness, and the oneness is like the infinite blue sky maybe, but you know, it's so clouded over, the infinite blue sky, with all these little dots of egoic madness like the little dark clouds, but the blue sky is always there in the background. And the Course is saying reality is always there, and therefore you haven't harmed reality, you haven't hurt God, whatever God is, you haven't destroyed love, you just think you have, and therefore you feel guilty. This is the esoteric mystical side of the Course. We feel deep down guilty because we think we've destroyed God, but you can't destroy reality. And then we project that deep down guilt outwards and see a wicked world, which we actually quite enjoy, despite moaning and groaning about it. And the thing is to, unfortunately, we have to bring the guilt back in, which can be painful, and realize that actually this is our dream and our responsibility. And then through that, we can go, oh, I don't like this, I don't want to be the guilty one. Maybe I can let it go altogether and dissolve it in love. And then we're back home permanently eventually. But I think, yes, I think we have glimpses of that state of being, that pure love and light. And then we fall out of grace again because we rather like being the ruler of our own kingdom, and we don't want to give it up without a bit of a struggle, I suspect. However dark it might be, it's ours, we created it. And of course, there's beauty in what we created. I mean, the Course is very clear. God did not create this physical universe. He didn't create the sun. He didn't create the mountains. He didn't create the beautiful rivers. So then you think, well, if we did that, we're not all bad, because we actually did create some rather beautiful aspects to our kingdom. And that's the light and the love that's still in us, I think, when it's our creation. The Course is very clear on that. Because, of course, traditional Christianity sings wonderful hymns about God creating the earth. He didn't really. Why would he? And that to me explains why when people say, how could God possibly allow you to suffer? Why would a loving God do that? He didn't create it, we did, and he gave us that free will and choice, because he wouldn't be a very loving father to say to lock us in heaven and not let us out. To have a little go at being grown up and then thinking, actually, I think I'll go home now, I've had enough. See, it's quite funny, really, the Course.
There's a great, Neil Donald Walsh writes a book along these lines, and it puts an interesting twist on it. It's called The Little Soul and the Sun.
Oh, it's a lovely book, that, yeah, lovely.
So then the idea is that this place of duality is created because if there was so this is an idea, you know, this is an idea. So in the beginning, there was only love, there was only heaven, there was only the word, there was only the divine, however you want to describe that, and everything was good.
Garden of Eden, yes.
Yes, yeah, which is you know, the depth of that story about we go out into the world of duality. It's literally everything's good. We bite the apple of the knowledge of good and evil, which is the separation, duality of yin and yang. And then we go out into this world of duality. And so then the idea that Neil Donald Walsh puts forward is the same as Vedanta, is that this is a place that is necessary to understand what love is, because we can't understand what love is without hatred, in the way that we can't understand what hot is without cold, or no one's tall unless there's short people like myself, you know. That's and the tall people like yourself. So yeah, I kind of like that idea.
It's a beautiful story, but it doesn't quite fit with the Course, because the Course says there is actually, this world is meaningless. It doesn't have a meaning. It's a big mistake, and do all that you can to rise above it. So I love that book though, and it's all about forgiveness, and it's a beautiful book, but it doesn't quite fit with the Course, because the Course is very radical. Your whole world is meaningless. There's no point in staying around there. There's no lessons to learn. Just come home.
I love it. It's so in with what the fearsome yogis and mystics, exactly what they say. This world is illusion. Get out of here. And of course, I'm sat here with my coffee, with my chocolate sprinkles and my whipped cream, going, "Oh, come on, it's not that bad." But I guess what they're saying is, it's like, I think that's what meditation maybe does sometimes, when we have those samadhi states, or when we have that that expansion of freedom where our mind just becomes quiet for a while. For a moment, we're shown something like this is possible. And then, of course, what they would call our samskaras arise again in the feeling body, our tension, our trappedness. And so we become trapped again into the world, I guess that at the beginning of our conversation, as we kind of wrap up in the last few minutes or so, but at the beginning of our conversation, that's what we were kind of talking about, how many lifetimes, or, there's so many stories of I think Ram Dass tells a story of, it takes us, a Buddhist master says to the novice, this is so hard to hear, but he says that a bird flies over a huge mountain in the Himalayas with a silk cloth in its mouth, and it brushes against the top of the mountain, and it said it will take as many lifetimes to reach nirvana as it would take that bird to wear the mountain down with the silk cloth. Now, I don't know if they're stories that are meant to just completely collapse all trying, so that we enter into was Christ said, the kingdom of heaven, which is already within us, and or is it already so, yeah.
I think, of course, would call you on that one and say, actually, it's just pure choice. We don't want to go home. But like a bolshy teenager, we made a huge mistake. We wandered off and decided to live on the streets for a while. And we can't admit our own mistake because we're too arrogant. So we're gonna keep suffering for a while before eventually, maybe, if we find a drop of grace, we decide it's time to go home. But we don't want to go home. That's what the Course calls us on it. You say, oh, you come up with all this crap about how difficult it is, and Christ is going, it ain't difficult, you just don't want to come home yet. Well, fine, keep suffering then, keep begging on the street. The feast is prepared, but it will wait. We'll put it in the microwave when you get home. Christ really calls us on that one, actually. So, I mean, yes, of course, I'm not being naive, and I know how difficult the path can be, and it feels difficult and all the rest of it. I think it is quite helpful to remind ourselves that actually it isn't that difficult, but we're choosing not to return home to love completely because we're too arrogant to realize we made a huge mistake, or we're still frightened, actually, that we don't 100% believe that God's going to forgive us. I think that's also at the bottom of it all. What if we go home and he shoots us dead for being such a terrible child of his, or whatever, so there's that as well. There's all sorts of reasons why we don't want to go home, but of course calls us on it and says it's very simple. You could go home now. And just be aware of that actually you don't want to come home yet. And that's fine. God doesn't mind. He loves you, whether you're out on the streets begging or whether you come home. It's no different to him, except he does realize you're missing and he'd rather like to see you again. But, because I mean, imagine if I said to you now, Graham, let's just have a suicide pact and go home because the body is an egoic trap. And I don't think we'd do it. So we are quite addicted to being in our own egoic kingdom and in the physical world. And the chocolate sprinkles, I sometimes think, I quite like chocolate, And it is a substitute. Of course it is, for the love and the oneness, but we're not there. And it's partly because we're addicted. We're addicted to being special, I think. We're addicted to being special, and also frightened that specialness is going to cost us everything and end us in hell for eternity, which is another great myth. And it's not true, but it's going to take a lot of persuading, I think, that we can go home and be safe, and that our Father will welcome us and not tell us off. That's at the core of some of this. And it's all very unconscious, subconscious. Course in Miracles came after Freud, and people say it couldn't have happened before Freud because it sort of explores that idea that a lot of this stuff, this egoic stuff, isn't conscious even. So how can we possibly consciously rise above something that's so deep within us and so dark, and we've covered it up very well. So it's ironic, it's a paradox again. It's really, really easy. We could just go home, straight home to God and say, I'm back. And at the same time, it's really, really difficult because we're so scared of what might happen if we did that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. This is a beautiful conversation. So I guess I suppose the essence is, so when you say go back, I guess what I'm feeling from you is when you mentioned, and of course we're not saying to anyone that never contemplate suicide as a way to getting back to the light, but I guess what you're saying there is
if we take ourselves with us, our mind would still be there in exactly the same place.
Yes.
I didn't mean it like that, because that's very silly thing to do.
No, I 100% hear you, but I'm aware that just want to make that clear for everyone listening as well. But what I really felt what you said, and what I felt what you were saying was, okay, like, if the divine showed up and came right here and said, okay, I'm going to take you home, I might be like, but what about what people going to do? I'm like, I've got this appointment at the hairdresser this afternoon. I might have to cancel that. And what about that new job? And
my birthday tomorrow and I've got a cake. Can you wait a bit?
Yeah, I've got the delivery coming from Amazon. He'll get it at the door. So I guess those are what in Buddhism, the Buddha would call the attachments, because he just says it's only at the attachments that keep us here, the running away from pain, and the grasping at what we can perceive as pleasure. But actually, once in any moment we're free of that, we're already connected to that place.
And we can get there without dying, I think, as well. That's the important point, isn't it? There are great souls that have got there without leaving their physical body. And as you said, they're of this world, but not of this world. They're in the world, but not of this world. And they've cracked it while still having a physical body. I suspect it's easier to crack it maybe without a body at some point. And some of my greatest meditations, I haven't really felt my body very much. You know, you can expand beyond the body a bit. The body is quite a trap. I love what Van Das says, dying is like taking off a tight pinching shoe, you know, because the body does trap us a bit. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't open up to getting there, to returning home to love while still in a physical body, of course. It's very important to make that point. It's possible. We've got great souls who've demonstrated it, not necessarily from this book, but from all the other wonderful spiritual traditions. And they all come together anyway. It's all about love. And the more we just go, okay, let's keep this simple. What's the loving approach to any problem in the world, including our own depression and anxiety? How can I be loving to myself and others equally? And forgiveness is a form of love. Compassion is a form of love. Joy is a form of love. You know, just seeing love as an umbrella, a beautiful rainbow, really. And it's here in this world. There's so much love in this world because we are angels who created this world, and we just had a moment of madness. I like the idea that we actually created the beauty in this world, not God. It's only a pale reflection, I think, of God's beauty, but it's still beautiful, this world. So let's not end on a negative note. This world is beautiful. It's full of love. All those acts of kindness. The Course says every time a brother or sister smiles kindly at someone, that's a gift to you. Isn't that a beautiful idea? Because there's so much kindness in the world.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I could actually talk for the rest of the day, but it's been so beautiful speaking to you and catching up. And I'll be back up north soon. So I was saying, you know, it'd be nice to come and see you both.
And if anyone's watching, have a beautiful, beautiful day, and don't worry too much about all this stuff. Just do the simple things. What's the kind thing to do here? You know, it's so simple in one sense. Kindness is a beautiful aspect of being loving and being in the oneness, and you know, keep it simple, because the Course isn't simple in one sense, but at the heart of it, it's just pure love. And to me, Jesus is such a kind, compassionate, amazing figure. My favorite story is when he turned the water into wine just to be kind, you know, not to prove he was. I always say if he could have popped down to Asda, he would have done, but you know, he couldn't at the time, so he had to manufacture it himself. But let's be kind and turn the water into wine for people.
Peggy, I want to ask as well. Are you running classes at Gorton Monastery, Tai Chi classes at the moment?
Thursday mornings, 10:30 to 11:30. Everyone's very welcome. Just turn up if you're around. If anyone's around in Manchester, yes. I mean,
sorry.
Go on.
I was going to say also, I'll put a link to your website in the description of this video. What other work have you got going on at the moment?
No, nothing much. You know, I'm getting old. I just like to sit around and eat chocolate cake. There's a lovely little book I've been reading. It's called, someone gave it to us for Christmas, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse. And it's all about being kind to each other. But Mole, there's a lovely character called Mole in here, and his nirvana is to eat cake. So he just eats cake all day long. So that's me. I just sit around eating cake all day long.
Me too.
Just to finish, Kenneth Wapnick, the greatest Course in Miracles teacher ever, once he'd finished giving these amazing lectures about the Course, he used to say, "The cookies have arrived, let's go and eat."
I love that. Wonderful. Oh, it's so lovely to catch up with you. And I will see you in person in a few weeks, hopefully. Yeah.
God bless everybody. Have a wonderful day.
God bless everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Peggy.
Oh, it's a great pleasure, Graham. Lovely to talk to you.
Likewise.